Hello everyone, it's your old pal Brian Hunt, and welcome to episode 6 of 60 Seconds of Risk. Today we're going to cover a topic that's on the top of everybody's mind these days, and that's the risk of inflation. Today, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen said Thursday that Americans will likely see another year of very uncomfortable high inflation. As was quoted by Secretary Yellen, we have seen a very meaningful increase in gas prices, and my guess is that next month we'll see further evidence of impact on U.S. inflation of Putin's war on Ukraine. In addition to that, the Treasury Secretary's comments came just hours after the Labor Department said consumer prices rose 7.9% in January, the fastest pace since 1982. So that impacts everybody, not just the construction environment, which I work with a lot, but everyone. But the question is, what actually is inflation and what causes inflation? So it's key to know that there's actually sort of two sources of inflation. One is sort of what we call money supply. The second is what we call cost push factors. So let's talk about money supply first. If you think about money, it's a store of value. And there's any given time an X amount of money in circulation in every economy. So let me give you an example of try to describe how this might work. Let's say currently I'm using 3 $1 bills, but let's assume that this is actually the equivalent to say 3 trillion US dollars. And there's more in that circulation, but go with me. Let's just say right now there's currently $3 trillion in circulation currently in the US economy. And let's say you went to the bar down the street and you bought a beer and it cost, let's say, $6. $6 to get a beer, not including tip. And then you went home, went to bed, and you wake up, that all of a sudden, there's not just 3 trillion US dollars. There is now actually 6 trillion US dollars. So overnight, what used to be prices based upon 3 trillion, now there are 6 trillion. What does that mean? Well, the price, basically, for everything has lost value of the dollar. And by that, if, say, the prices for this beer was dependent upon 3 trillion worth of dollars, and therefore a single dollar had X amount of value. If by overnight you totally increase the money supply by a factor of 2, then really everything needs to change by a factor of 2. So in order to maintain buying power, this beer that costs $6 in a bar should now be $12 overnight. So if there's more money in circulation, therefore the actual dollar you have loses value because there's more of these. It's a question of scarcity. If there were, say, $3 trillion and the next day is only 2 trillion, there's fewer of these things. So therefore your dollar purchasing power is increased. Therefore you could buy a beer for less than $6. The inverse is that if you go from 3 trillion to 6 trillion, you've basically sliced the value of every single dollar by 50%. Therefore, in order to recoup the same value, you have to increase prices by twice. So that's the question of factor of money supply. But then what we're all sort of seeing right now and get impacted is the question of cost push factors. And that go back to your days of Economics 101. Many of you might be familiar with this. This is sort of a standard supply demand graph that indicates what prices are. And as you can see, you have supply and demand. And when everything's price is settled, that's your point. But if there's any change along the line, specifically say supply shifts in this situation, think about it as what's currently going on. There's fewer barrels of oil on the open market because of Russia imports are being banned. Or think about the long term, since majority of grain throughout Europe and the world comes from both Russia and Ukraine. And right now, war is going with Ukraine, and farmers will not be able to plant wheat. Therefore, supply is going to shift to the left. So now the new price point goes to the left. So rather than being at price 1, it's increased to price 2. So this is the original set. The supply line moved. Now you have an increase in prices. So this is actually what we're looking into for in the future. Again, inflation comes from a variety of factors. If you want to know more about the fundamentals of supply chain with respects to money and how it impacts supply and demand, impacts your prices, I would highly recommend you get the book from Ray Dalio called Big Debt Crisis. Principles for Navigating Big Debt Crisis by Ray Dalio. Ray Dalio, you can look him up, a very wealthy man, very successful investor, and he's put his insights in capital markets into these books. I find them very useful, and I would suggest you get a copy as well. Again, this has been Brian Hunt for 60 Seconds of Risk. I hope you enjoyed this episode as well. Please leave any suggestions or comments on my LinkedIn posts. You can also find me on YouTube. Please subscribe. And any suggestions or topics or individuals you want to see me interview next time, please let me know. You can also find me on Twitter. Good night.